Who'd have thought? Dipping into your savings during COVID could trigger the same brain activity patterns as physical pain, like, ooh, that hurts. But that's what the data suggests. Today, we're looking at why financial insecurity is a biological problem. How does the brain experience money? As a neuroscientist, I've always been really curious about how different people think and behave differently. And I know money has a lot to do with it. This is a video about money, income inequality, and mental health. When you anticipate money, like payday, the reward processing centers, like the ventral striatum, get activated. And some of the same areas also light up when you just received money too. But when you lose money, and this is when it gets really interesting, when you lose money when you were expecting a gain, then your brain can process that loss as a physical pain. Just think of the time when the stimulus checks were supposed to come and didn't, or when your student loans were supposed to be forgiven but weren't. This meta-analysis study compared brain activity during monetary loss, physical pain, and social pain, like social rejection or exclusion. And what they found is that all three share some overlapping activation patterns, including the insula and anterior cingulate cortex. So yeah, losing money, losing what you value, feels like pain. It can literally feel excruciating as a physical injury. And if you felt the pain at the grocery store nowadays because things are so expensive to buy, take that as your brain validating your feelings. 2020 to 2022 feels like a blur. And we've all experienced some level of interruptions in our lives during COVID pandemic. But what's intriguing to me is that the experience of loss didn't hit everyone the same way. In fact, how you coped with it depended a lot on how much money you had in your bank account. When you look at the depression prevalence data from US adults during COVID times, people with a lower income and lower savings are more vulnerable to major depression symptoms. One study during the first year of COVID found that people with household income under $20,000 had 6.8 times the odds of persistent depressive symptoms. And this is compared to those with 75 grand or more, and this is after adjusting for demographics. And people with less than $5,000 in their savings also have higher odds of depressive symptoms. So financial insecurity is not just some stressful event, but it's actually a threat to our health. And as you can probably guess, financial security is closely tied to nutrition. There's a published case study of a 28-year-old woman from America who lost her job during COVID and ate only 1 cup of ramen noodles a day for 22 months. 22 months. She lost almost 60 pounds, and she ended up in the ER with extremely low levels of potassium in her blood. And doctors thought that this was something to do with neurological, because that's what the most common cause is for having hypokalemia. But thankfully, she didn't have stroke or multiple sclerosis or any other neuropathy. But still, I think this is a vivid example of how dangerous it can be to have a lack of savings and lack of financial security. Just losing a job can literally derail you and your health. And the richest country in the world should not have problems like this. Plenty of research shows that being poor is costly for mental and physical health. In Australia, lower income is associated with all kinds of chronic illnesses in people 45 and older. In another study in Sweden, this is one of the rare studies that followed people for 43 years. They found that people who have been poor at least once in their lives had greater psychological distress than those who never experienced poverty in their times of financial stress. The negative effect of being poor at a young age on your health seems to persist even at 75 or older. It shows just how important it is for us to have societal safety nets, and policy interventions sooner rather than later. This sort of observation is consistent across countries. This is a Lancet Healthy Longevity study that used data from 33 countries. And look at this heat map. The darker reddish pink color shows the higher co-occurrence of physical, psychological, and cognitive disorders. And you can see that lower education, lower wealth, and lower socioeconomic status are strongly associated with more combined problems. Now, let's talk about the brain networks. The striatum, anterior insula, the anterior cingulate cortex are all important nodes in what's called the salience network. And it's a system that helps you detect what's valuable and what's threatening. You can see the marked areas comparing between healthy controls and patients with depression. And if you look at the measurements of the surface area, it's about 70% larger in people with depression. They even found that it could potentially be an early marker for depression. That's based on analyzing some existing data tracking children's brain health and brain development over many years. And there was a small group of kids who didn't have depression at one point before the age of 13, but then they went on to develop depression later in life in adolescence. When they looked at the brain scans of these children, the children who actually developed depression later in life had already formed larger salience networks before the clinical diagnosis, as early as 9 years of age. So this is why I take financial insecurity as serious as I do, because it is a mental health signal. If you feel like you're constantly in the red, the brain can see that as a dangerous environment to be surviving in. And it can actually heighten up the salience network can stay on high alert.
They don't have money for daycare, childcare, gas, food. So regardless of the party, they are blaming both sides. The workforce is sick and tired of being political pawns in the middle.
Still think this is a personal finance problem? It feels so far from reality, but when you just look just how close to home it actually is, then one might think. Another consequence that we have from not having financial security is it increases a potential risk-taking behavior, especially when it comes to monetary gains. This one study actually looked at how losing a job reduces spending in almost all categories except for gambling. It causes people to spend money on things for the heck of it. It's almost as if people think of it as like, hey, I don't have anything to lose at this point. You know, why not? YOLO, go big or go home, right? This kind of mentality might be coming around, and it's not helping them financially, obviously. It puts them even more in debt than they started with. They then did an experiment where they simulated compensating for the job income loss and found that a lump sum payout, essentially like a stimulus check that you would get, could reduce the risk-taking behavior in an experimental setting.
Our statewide initiative to do everything we can to rid the state of illegal gambling machines.
Finance and psychology can go hand in hand, and it's important to remember how interconnected these systems are. It feels so separated, but we have to study them all within this context of social pressures, economic pressures, the neurological pressures. It's important to realize as a society the physical and mental cost of not having financial security. We've seen that in many of these studies, when people are pushed to survival mode, it's harder for people with lower income or lower savings, and really no safety nets. If you have more wealth, God forbid, you have a disability down the road, you are better able to cope with it. And there's even a study about it. In the US, people live in fear of having one bad car accident away from bankruptcy. The lack of public and social services that we have in this country causes people to have to dip into their savings, even their retirement funds.
Announcing that next year my administration will give these often forgotten American workers, great people, the people that built our country, access to the same type of retirement plan offered to every federal worker. We will match your contribution with up to $1,000 each year. As we ensure that all Americans can profit from a rising stock market, let's also ensure that members of Congress cannot corruptly profit from using insider information.
I sigh a lot in this video because these are some dire situations I have to think about. And you know what? This is real life. This channel is about science in real life, and when we have to talk about these difficult subjects because otherwise we don't know how to go about it without the awareness, which is why I'm making these videos to help connect the latest brain research and those insights from there to the relevant current events that's happening that's affecting all of us. Because science, in my mind, can't be divorced from the societal issues, can't be divorced from political or economic pressures. They're all interconnected. And we have to talk about these effects on not only the individual, ourselves, but also as a group, as a collective. It's a whole society. So, with that in mind, it's important to realize the mental and physical cost of having financial insecurity. And as you saw in a lot of these materials, that people who don't have enough means, who don't have enough savings, at least $5,000 in their bank account in a liquidable asset, are the ones that are hit the hardest when there is a job loss, unexpected change in life, and there's a lot of disruptions that could happen in in our lives, and not having that gap to fill is really dire. People with less means, the people who need it most, are getting hit harder. About a third of all bankruptcies are caused by medical debt. We're literally waiting for one accident away from filing bankruptcy. And I think that puts people in a lot of anxious positions. You know, there is a lot of anxiety around the loss of job with AI, especially. We've experienced that during COVID times, but this is still happening in our day to day. This was a difficult topic to talk about, but it was a necessary one because I think these are the true costs that people might not even think about. This mental, cognitive, biological costs, the expenses beyond our daily living. If you want better mental health, we have to take financial security seriously. It matters at the individual and at the policy level. So I hope that you found this video helpful, and if so, I would love to hear about what sort of things that you found helpful, what sort of things that you didn't find helpful, so I can help, so that I can improve for the next video. My goal is to make 1% improvements each video that I post, and so I know there's a lot of things to learn, and I know it's a pretty steep learning curve here, but I'm trying my best to improve every time I post. And so I would love to hear from you, get some constructive feedback on what I could do better so that this viewing experience the best possible I can make it for you. Thank you, and I hope to see you soon. Society teaches us that money is important. It's a basic tool that we use to trade for things that we care about. It's what signals promised value. And this is something that we learn as early as a child. In Korea, there's this thing called 돌잔치, which is you have a table of maybe 3 to 4 items, and you put it in front of the baby, and the baby's supposed to pick out whatever they want, and whatever it picks out the first supposedly predicts the future of that baby. And usually there's money that represents wealth. There is thread that represents longevity, and then there's also a pencil to signal academic success. Apparently, I picked all 3, and and I picked the money first, and it looks like I achieved the academic success because I have a PhD in neuroscience from Emory University, and I am happy with it. But let's see about the other 2.